Welcome back. Let's dive into the concept of camel case, a prominent naming convention in the world of programming and software development. Camel case, as the name suggests, is reminiscent of the humps of a camel. It involves crafting compound words or phrases where each word starts with a capital letter, except for the first word. The words are then seamlessly joined together without any spaces or punctuation marks. But why is camel case used? Picture this: you're working on a piece of code, and you need to name a variable or function. Camel case steps in as the solution to enhance clarity and readability. The advantages? Readability. Code written in camel case is instantly more understandable. Clarity of structure. Each word stands out, offering insight into the identifier's purpose. Standardization. This widely used convention fosters smoother collaboration among developers. So guys in PowerApps as well use camel case as a tool to create code that's not only functional but also understandable. Its consistent use promotes clear communication within development teams, leading to more efficient and maintainable code bases. So, remember, when you see camel case, you're looking at the bridge that connects efficient coding with effortless understanding. Now, let's explore another essential naming convention, Pascal case. This convention holds a special place, particularly when it comes to data sources. Pascal case, also known as upper camel case, is a naming practice that shares similarities with camel case. Just like camel case, it eliminates spaces between words and capitalizes the initial letter of each word. However, there's a distinct difference. Pascal case also capitalizes the very first word. Here in this example you will see collection, which is a temp data source name, as ticket collect1, which is a Pascal case variable where first letter is capital letter and space between words is removed by capitalizing the initial letter of each word, here in this case ticket T, and collect1C is capital. In the world of naming conventions, Pascal case takes on the role of safeguarding your data sources. It's not just about arrangement, it's about according due importance. So, when you're coding with data sources, remember Pascal case, where the first word two steps into the limelight. Now let's look into best practices for object naming convention. As you create objects in your PowerApps, it's important to use consistent naming conventions for screens, controls, and data sources. This approach will make your apps easier to maintain, can help improve accessibility, and will make your code easier to read as those objects are referenced. The object naming conventions in this course are intended as guidelines, and organizations are free to develop their own standards. The main point is to be consistent. Now let's start discussing screen names naming convention. Screen names should reflect the purpose of the screen, so that it's easier to navigate through complex apps in PowerApps Studio. What's less obvious is that screen names are read aloud by screen readers, which are needed for users who have vision accessibility needs. Therefore, it's imperative that you use plain language to name your screens, and that the names include spaces and no abbreviations. Also, we recommend that you end the name with the word screen, so that the context is understood when the name is announced. Now let's look into some good example. Here you will see that the convention for right screen name is always end with word screen, and there is space between the name like. So guys, remember this point: give an intuitive name ending with screen. Now let's look into some bad example. Here you will notice some of the bad example of screen name. You should avoid following such bad screen naming pattern. Now let's proceed further and discuss about controls name best practices. We look into first best practices tip number 1 for controls name naming convention, that is, all control names on the canvas should use camel case. They should begin with a 3-character type descriptor, followed by the purpose of the control. This approach helps identify the type of control and makes it easier to build formulas and search. As you see in the table, it shows the abbreviations for common controls. Next, discuss about best practices tip number 2 for controls name naming convention, that is, control names must be unique across an application. If a control is reused on multiple screens, the short Screen name should be suffixed at the end as given in this example, where it is starting with gal, that is for gallery control, then purpose of control, which is self-explanatory, it is used to hold the bottom navigation menu, and at last it is using HS, which is telling this variable use in home screen, hence it is ended with HS. This approach makes it easier to reference the control and formulas across screens. Here you see, if you consistently name your controls, your app will be much cleaner in the navigation view, and your code will be much cleaner too. Now let's deep dive into best practices for data source name naming convention. But prior to that, you must understand that when you add a data source to your application, the name can't be changed in the PowerApps app. The name is inherited from the source connector or data entities that are derived from the connection. As you see in this example, where Excel data source inherited the name of data table for this example. Now we will discuss about code naming conventions. As you add code to your PowerApps, it becomes increasingly important to use consistent naming conventions for variables and collections. If variables are named correctly, you should be able to quickly discern the type, purpose, and scope of each. Let's look into variable name naming convention best practices. You must be descriptive of the variable's function. Think about what the variable is bound to and how it's used, and then name it accordingly. You should prefix your global and context variables differently. Make sure that you should prefix context variables with loc and prefix global variables with global. The name after the prefix should indicate the intents of the variable. Now let's discuss about collection names naming convention. Be descriptive of the collection's contents. Think about what the collection contains and how it's used, and then name it accordingly. Next, you should name after the prefix should indicate the intent or purpose of the collection. So on this note, I am stopping over here. See you in the next session.